When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. I remember that moment so clearly. The words hung in the air, sharp and cold, like the winter drafts that used to sneak through the windows of my old house. She didn't shout. She never shouted. Her voice was always calm, which somehow made everything worse. She simply said, "Ma, we need our space. It's time for you to go." And I just smiled. I nodded, as if she had just asked me to pass the salt. I placed the dishcloth I was holding neatly on the counter. I walked to the small room at the back of their house, the room they called mine, and I packed my single suitcase. I didn't look at the photographs on the wall. I didn't look at my son, who was standing in the hallway, staring at his shoes. I just smiled and walked out the front door. That smile wasn't because I was happy. It wasn't because I was strong. It was because my heart had already shattered into a million tiny pieces, and smiling was the only way to keep them from falling out of my mouth. It was a wall I had been building for a long, long time. You see, being a mother doesn't end when your children grow up. It doesn't end when they get married. But for me, that night, being a mother in their home, it had to end. And the hardest part wasn't the leaving. It was the years of small, quiet silences that led to that moment. It was the soup I kept making, long after they stopped wanting to eat it. For 28 years, I was a wife and a mother in a little house on Maple Street. My husband, Thomas, was a good man, a quiet man. He worked at the hardware store downtown, and every evening he would come home, hang his cap on the hook by the door, and sit in his armchair with the newspaper. Our life was simple. It was built on routines. On Sunday, we would go to church. On Wednesday, I would bake a meatloaf. Every day, after school, my son, Michael, would burst through the back door, drop his backpack on the floor, and tell me everything about his day before he even took off his jacket. I loved those afternoons. I loved the chaos of it. I loved the muddy footprints on my clean floor, the smell of his sweaty little head when I hugged him, the way he would talk with his mouth full of the cookies I always had waiting. I was the center of his world then, and he was the center of mine. Thomas would watch us from his chair, a small smile on his lips, and I knew he felt the same. We were a unit, a team, a family. When Michael was 23, he met a girl named Sarah. She was pretty in a serious way. She had intelligent eyes and always wore nice, pressed clothes. She was a librarian, very organized, very quiet. When Michael brought her home for Sunday dinner, she was polite. She complimented my roast chicken. She helped clear the table without being asked. Thomas whispered to me later, "She's a nice girl. Good head on her shoulders." And she was. I saw it. But from the very beginning, there was a distance. A wall that I couldn't quite see over. She would sit in our living room, but she seemed to be observing us, like we were a story in one of her library books. She wasn't unkind. She just wasn't warm. Not in the way I understood warmth. Our family's warmth was loud laughter, teasing, and stories told over and over again. Hers was a quiet, contained politeness. When they got married, it was a small, tasteful ceremony. Not the big, joyful party I had always imagined for my only son. But I told myself it was okay. It was their day. Sarah's parents were there, and they were nice people. Also quiet. Her father shook my hand firmly and said, "Well, they're starting their own journey now." I nodded, but a little piece of my heart felt a strange tug. A warning, maybe. But I pushed it away. For the first few years of their marriage, I saw them often enough. They would come over for Sunday dinner once or twice a month. Michael would still laugh at Thomas's old jokes. Sarah would sit and listen, occasionally adding a comment about her work. I tried so hard to connect with her. I would ask about her books, her programs at the library. She would answer, but she never asked me questions in return. I tried to teach her my recipe for chicken soup, the one my own mother taught me, the one Michael had loved since he was a baby. She stood in my kitchen, watching me, notebook in hand, writing down every step like it was a scientific experiment. She wrote, "A pinch of love," in her notebook, and I thought she was being sweet. But she looked up and said, "But what is a pinch?" A quarter teaspoon. The changes started small. So small that at first I thought I was imagining things. Michael's phone calls became shorter. Instead of a long, rambling chat about his week, they became 5-minute check-ins.
Mom.
Everything's fine. Busy at work.
Love you. Bye.
I told myself it was just his job. He was a project manager now, lots of responsibility. Men get busy. Then, the invitations to our house became fewer. They would cancel Sunday dinner at the last minute. Something came up, Michael would say. Or, Sarah's not feeling well. I started to notice a pattern. The cancellations were always a little more frequent after I had visited their home. And when I did visit, I started to feel like a guest. A guest who didn't quite know the rules. The first time I felt it was when I went over to drop off a batch of my chicken soup. Michael had a cold, and I wanted to help. I let myself in with the key they had given me, something I had done 100 times before. I was walking towards the kitchen when Sarah appeared in the hallway. She didn't say hello. She looked at the pot in my hands, then at the door and said, "Oh, next time, Ma, could you maybe knock first? We might be busy." I stopped in my tracks. I felt my face get hot. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, my voice a little too cheerful. "I'm so sorry. I just wanted to drop this off for Michael."
She took the pot for me. "Thank you," she said.
"I'll make sure he gets it." And she closed the kitchen door behind her, leaving me standing alone in the hallway. I stood there for a moment, looking at the closed door, at the family photos on the wall that now included her. I felt like a stranger. I let myself out, quietly. I told Thomas about it that night. He was in his armchair, reading. He looked over his glasses at me. "She's just particular, Helen. She likes things a certain way. Don't take it to heart. It's their home now." And he was right. It was their home. I was the one who needed to learn. So I learned. I learned to knock. I learned to call first. I learned not to drop by unannounced, even if I was just bringing a pie I had baked. With every rule I learned, the distance grew. I stopped leaving messages on their answering machine when they didn't pick up because Sarah once told me, a little tersely, that they got too many messages and it was hard to keep track. I stopped sending little cards in the mail because she never mentioned them and I didn't want to seem like I was trying too hard. The biggest change came when my grandson, Leo, was born. My heart just burst when I saw him. He was the image of Michael as a baby. The same tuft of dark hair, the same little button nose. I was in the hospital room, crying happy tears, waiting for my turn to hold him. But Sarah's mother was there. She was holding him, and she held him for a long time. Then her sister held him. Then her father. By the time he got to me, visiting hours were almost over. I held him for maybe 5 minutes. I looked at Michael, who was hovering near Sarah's bed, beaming. He caught my eye and gave me a small, helpless shrug. A shrug. My son shrugged at me, as if to say, "What can I do?" After they came home from the hospital, things got worse. There were more rules. Please wash your hands before you hold him. Of course, I understood that. Please don't kiss him on the face. Okay, I understood that too, germs. Please don't stay too long. It disrupts his schedule. That one was harder to hear. I would go over, eager to see my grandson, and I would feel like I was on a timer. I'd hold him for a few minutes, then Sarah would appear and say, "Okay, time for his nap," and take him from my arms. I started bringing soup. It was my way of still being a mother, of still being useful. Chicken soup for Sarah, to help with her milk. Vegetable soup when Leo started eating solids. I would spend all morning making it, using vegetables from my garden, using my mother's old pot. I'd pour it into a nice container, drive it over, knock on the door, hand it over with a smile, and leave. I'd get a quick "Thanks, Ma," from Michael at the door, or a polite "That's very kind of you, Helen," from Sarah. And I'd drive home, and I'd feel empty. I'd look at the passenger seat, where the soup used to be, and I'd feel like I had just delivered a package. Not a piece of my love. Just a package. Thomas passed away 3 years after Leo was born. It was sudden. A heart attack. 1 minute he was in his chair, the next he was gone. The silence in our house became a physical thing. It had weight. It pressed down on me. Michael and Sarah were there for the funeral, of course. Sarah was very organized, helping with the arrangements. She brought casseroles that people from her work had made. They were good casseroles. But they weren't mine. They weren't from my kitchen. After the funeral, after everyone had left, I was alone. Michael and Sarah came by the next day. We sat in the living room, in the same spots we always had, but everything felt different. Thomas's chair was empty. Michael sat on the couch, holding my hand. "Mom," he said, his voice soft. "We've been talking. We don't think you should be here, all by yourself. It's a big house. Too much for you." I felt a flicker of something. Hope, maybe. "What do you mean?" I asked. "We have a spare room," Sarah said. It was the first time she had spoken. "It's small, but it's private. It would make financial sense for you to sell this place. And you could be closer to Leo." Closer to Leo. Those 3 words were the most beautiful words I had heard in months. To see my grandson grow up. To be a part of their daily life. Maybe this was the answer. Maybe this was how I would finally find my place again. I looked at their faces, my son's hopeful, Sarah's calm and logical. I ignored the little voice in my head that whispered about the rules. I ignored the memory of all those closed doors. "Okay," I whispered, tears finally coming. "Okay, selling the house on Maple Street was like losing Thomas all over again." Every room held a memory. The kitchen, where I had made 1,000 meals. The backyard, where I had watched Michael learn to ride a bike. The bedroom, where Thomas and I had talked in the dark for 40 years. Letting it go felt like cutting off a piece of myself. But I did it.
For them.
For Leo. Moving into their house was
Disorienting.
The room they gave me was at the back of the house. It was clean and quiet. It had a small bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out onto their neat, fenced-in backyard. It was a nice room, but it wasn't mine. I hung a few of my photographs on the wall, but they looked out of place against the pale gray paint Sarah had chosen. My old, worn rocking chair looked sad in the corner. The first few weeks, I tried so hard to be helpful. I would wake up early and go into the kitchen to make breakfast. But Sarah had a system. She had special granola. She had a specific type of milk for Leo. My scrambled eggs and toast were met with polite smiles, but were often left uneaten. "He's used to the routine, Ma," Michael explained gently. I tried to help with the laundry. I found a pile of Leo's little shirts and took them to the laundry room. Sarah found me just as I was about to start the machine.
"Oh,"
she said, her voice a little too bright. "Thank you, Helen, but I have a special way of washing his things.
He
has sensitive skin." She took the basket from my hands. So I focused on my soup. It was the one thing I knew I could do. I started making a big pot every Sunday like I always had. I'd leave it in a container in the refrigerator, hoping they would help themselves during the week. The first Sunday, I saw Michael take a bowl. He smiled at me. "Thanks, Mom." Just like old times. My heart sang. But the next week, the container was still full. By Thursday, I noticed it was gone. I thought they had eaten it. But then, on Friday, I saw a new, store-bought container of soup in the fridge. It was a different brand. I opened my container, which was now in the back of the fridge. It was still full. It hadn't been touched. Sarah had thrown my soup away to make room for her own. I didn't say anything. I just closed the refrigerator door, my hands shaking a little. The next Sunday, I didn't make soup.
No one asked why.
The loneliness in that house was a special kind of pain. It was worse than being alone in my own house after Thomas died. Because in my house, the loneliness was just silence. Here, the loneliness was the sound of a family living around me, but not with me. I could hear them laughing in the living room while I sat in my room. I could hear Sarah reading Leo a bedtime story, her voice soft and melodic, while I stood in the hallway, longing to peek in. But I didn't dare. I didn't want to disrupt the routine. The worst was the silence at the dinner table. We ate together most nights, at Sarah's insistence. "It's important for Leo to have family meals," she would say. And we would sit there, the 4 of us. Michael and Sarah would talk about their day, about Leo's school, about plans for the weekend. I would sit and eat my food, feeling like a ghost at a feast. If I tried to add something, a story from my day, a memory of Thomas, the conversation would just stop. They would listen politely and then Sarah would turn back to Michael and continue their previous conversation as if I hadn't spoken. I became an observer. I watched my grandson grow. I watched him learn to read. I watched him ride his little bike in the backyard. I watched him from my window, my hand pressed against the glass, feeling the cold. I was so close to him, yet so far away. He was polite to me, like his mother. He would give me a quick hug goodnight, but he never crawled into my lap. He never asked me for a story. His world was his parents, and I was just the quiet woman in the back room. The breaking point wasn't one big thing. It was 1,000 little cuts. It was the way Sarah would sigh when I accidentally left a light on in the hallway. It was the way Michael's eyes would dart to Sarah whenever I asked a simple question, like if they needed anything from the grocery store, as if waiting for her permission to answer. It was the day Leo came home from school with a drawing of his family. He had drawn Michael, Sarah, himself, and their dog, Buster. I wasn't in the picture. I pointed to it and said, with a fake cheerfulness that hurt my throat, "That's a beautiful picture, sweetie." "Who's this?" He pointed to each figure. "Daddy, Mommy, me, and Buster." He didn't even realize he had left me out. To him, I wasn't a part of his immediate family. I was just there. That night, I lay in my small bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the central heating. I realized I had become invisible. I had given up my home, my memories, my independence, and in return, I had gotten a polite prison. I had traded my life for a room. And the worst part was I didn't blame Sarah. I didn't even blame Michael. I blamed myself. I had taught my son to be a good husband, to put his wife first. He was just doing what I had raised him to do. I just never thought that putting his wife first would mean pushing his mother so far away that she ceased to exist. The conversation I had been dreading for months happened on a Tuesday. It was raining outside. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter, a habit I couldn't break. Sarah came in, holding a cup of tea. She stood by the window, looking out at the rain. The silence was thick. Then she turned. Her face was calm, but her eyes were determined. She looked at me, and for a second, I thought I saw a flicker of something else. Sadness, maybe, or guilt, but it was gone in an instant. "Ma," she said. Her voice was quiet. "Can we talk?" I put the cloth down. My heart started to pound, a slow, heavy drum in my chest. "Of course, sweetheart." She took a breath. "This arrangement, it isn't working. For any of us." I just looked at her. I couldn't speak. "Michael and I, we need our space. We need to be a family, just the three of us. Having you here, it's like we can't fully be ourselves. It's not fair to you either. You're not happy here. I can see it." So she had seen it. The loneliness, the quiet, the invisible woman. She had seen it all, and she had decided it was a problem to be fixed. By removing me. "I've looked into some options," she continued, her voice steady, like she was presenting a project at work. "There's a very nice senior living community about 20 minutes from here. They have lovely apartments. It's independent living, but there are activities, other people your age. I think you would be much happier there." Michael agrees, Michael agrees. The two words that cut deeper than anything else. My son, my baby, the little boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street, agreed that I should be sent away. I felt the tears burning behind my eyes. But I wouldn't let them fall. Not in front of her. I had held them in for so long. I could hold them in a little longer. I picked up the dishcloth, folded it neatly, and placed it on the counter. That's when I smiled. That soft, sad, wall-building smile. "Okay," I said. My voice was surprisingly calm. "If that's what you think is best." She looked relieved. A tiny tension went out of her shoulders. "We'll help you move, of course. We can go visit it this weekend if you like." "That won't be necessary," I said. "I don't need much." I walked out of the kitchen, past her, down the hall to my room. I didn't look back. I pulled my old suitcase from the back of the closet. The same one I had packed for my honeymoon with Thomas, so many years ago. I opened it on the bed. I packed slowly. My photographs. A small porcelain bird that had been my mother's. Thomas's old watch, which I kept in a velvet pouch. 3 pairs of pants, 4 sweaters, my good church dress. I didn't pack the things I had bought to fit into their house. The pale gray throw blanket Sarah had given me for my bed. the modern lamp she had picked out. I left them there. As I was packing, I heard a soft knock. The door opened. It was Michael. His face was pale. His eyes were red. He looked like a little boy again, lost and scared. "Mom," he whispered. "Mom, please don't go." I stopped folding a sweater and looked at him. I felt a wave of love so powerful it almost knocked me over. But it was mixed with a deep, profound sorrow. "Michael," I said gently, "your wife just asked me to leave. She said you agreed." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since he was a teenager. "I know. I mean, it's just she's stressed, Mom. She has a lot on her plate. She didn't mean it like that." I looked at my son, this man I had raised, and I realized he was caught between two worlds. He loved me, I knew he did. But he was terrified of losing her. He was trying to please everyone, and in doing so, he was losing himself. "Michael," I said, my voice soft. "It's okay. It really is. I'm not angry. I'm not even sad, not in the way you think.
I'm tired.
I'm tired of being a problem to be solved. I'm tired of being invisible in a house full of people." Tears started rolling down his cheeks. "But where will you go? What will you do?" I zipped up the suitcase. It was so light. My whole life, packed into one small bag. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I'll figure it out. I always have." I walked over to him and put my hand on his cheek. It was wet with his tears. "You be a good father to Leo," I said. "And a good husband to Sarah. You're a good man, Michael. The best thing I ever did. Don't you ever forget that." I picked up my suitcase and walked out of the room. I walked down the hall, past the living room where Sarah was sitting on the couch, pretending to read a magazine. I walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the cool evening air. I didn't look back. I closed the door softly behind me. That was 5 years ago. I didn't go to the senior living community Sarah suggested. I found my own place. A small one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. It's not much to look at. The kitchen is tiny, and the carpet is a little worn. But it's mine. The walls are covered with my photographs. My rocking chair is by the window, where I can watch the birds. The smell of my cooking fills the air again. I make soup every Sunday. Big pots of it. Chicken soup, vegetable beef, lentil soup. I don't make it for them anymore. I make it for myself. And for my neighbors. The young couple downstairs, the one with the new baby. I bring them soup. The elderly gentleman across the hall, who lost his wife last year. I bring him soup. They don't see it as a package. They see it for what it is. A warm meal. A little bit of comfort. A way of saying, "I see you. You are not alone." Michael calls me every Sunday now, without fail. At first, the calls were awkward, full of guilt and unspoken apologies. But slowly, they changed. We talk about his work. We talk about Leo. Leo is 10 now. He plays soccer. He's good at math, just like his father. Sometimes, Michael brings Leo to visit. We sit in my little apartment and I make them lunch. Leo loves my chicken soup. He asks for it by name. He calls it Grandma's magic soup. Sarah doesn't come, and that's okay. This is our time. One Sunday, about a year after I left, Michael came alone. He sat on my small couch, looking around the room. He looked at the photographs, at the peace in my face. He took a deep breath. "Mom," he said, "I'm so sorry. For everything. I should have been stronger. I should have stood up for you." I reached over and patted his hand. "Oh, honey," I said. "There's nothing to forgive. You did what you thought was right. You were protecting your family. That's what a good man does." "But I hurt you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I hurt the person who loved me most in the world." I smiled. A real smile, this time. Not a wall. "You did," I said gently. "But that's okay. A mother's heart is a lot bigger and a lot stronger than you think. It's been broken before. It heals. It has to. Because its job isn't over. It just changes." He looked at me, tears in his eyes. "I don't deserve you." "You're my son," I said. "You will always deserve my love. That's the one rule that will never change." Life doesn't always turn out the way we plan. You spend your whole life building a home, raising a family, thinking you know how the story will end. You think you'll grow old surrounded by your children and grandchildren, the matriarch at a big, noisy table. But sometimes the table gets smaller. Sometimes the chairs are empty. And that's okay. I learned that you can't force your way into someone's life, even if you grew that life inside your own body. Love isn't about being needed all the time. It's about knowing when to step back. It's about letting go, even when every part of you wants to hold on. It's about finding a new way to be a mother, even when your son is a man with a family of his own. And sometimes, letting go is the most loving thing you can do.
For them.
And for yourself.